For 10 years, my mother-in-law handed me her coat at the door like I was hired help. Tonight, in front of 60 guests at my husband's 40th birthday party, she stood up, tapped her glass, and told the whole backyard that her son had given me a beautiful life. What she didn't know was that I owned the house under our feet, the company that paid for it, and a folder sitting in my lawyer's office that was about to end her 15-year secret for good. My name is Rachel Turner. This is the story of the night everything I'd quietly built and everything Linda had quietly hidden came out at exactly the same time. I married David Turner 11 years ago. Back then we were nobody. A cramped apartment, 2 entry-level jobs, ramen on Tuesdays. What David never fully understood, because I never made a big deal of it, was that I wasn't just good at my job in software. I was the 3rd employee at a company that 3 years into our marriage went public in an IPO that made headlines. I didn't sell my shares early like almost everyone else did. I sat on them, quietly, for years. By the time the house was purchased, all cash, no mortgage, my name alone on the deed for tax reasons, I was already worth more than David's entire extended family combined. He knew the broad strokes. He never asked for numbers, and I never volunteered them. That would matter later, more than I could have guessed. Linda, my mother-in-law, decided from day one that I was decoration in David's success story. David worked so hard for all this. She'd announced to dinner guests, waving her hand around my living room like a realtor. Meanwhile, I refilled her wine, retrieved her reading glasses, and absorbed a decade of comments that started small and never stopped growing. By year 3, she'd stopped saying please. By year 6, she'd started letting herself into my house with a spare key David gave her without asking me. By year 8, she'd rearranged my kitchen twice and told a family friend directly in front of me that I was lucky David found someone willing to keep his house in order. I let it slide for years, telling myself it wasn't worth the fight. What I didn't know, what I only discovered 18 months before David's birthday party, was that Linda's disrespect wasn't just personality. It was strategy. It started with a phone call I wasn't supposed to overhear. I'd come home early from a work trip and found Linda in our home office, a room she had no reason to be in, going through a drawer of David's old paperwork. When I asked what she was doing, she smiled tightly and said she was just looking for a recipe card she'd left here years ago. I didn't believe her. Recipe cards don't live in a drawer with mortgage documents and insurance files. 2 weeks later, my lawyer, the one who'd handled the house purchase and my stock trust, called me with something strange. Someone had contacted the county records office asking detailed questions about the deed on our house, whose name was on it, whether it could be contested, whether a family member could file a claim under certain circumstances. The request had come from a legal consulting service Linda used for her own small estate matters. My lawyer, a careful woman named Patricia who has handled my affairs for a decade, told me plainly, "Rachel, someone close to you is trying to find out if there's a way to take this house from you." I didn't tell David, not yet. I needed to understand what I was dealing with first. Over the following months, I started paying much closer attention, not just to Linda's comments, but to her actual behavior. She began pushing, gently but persistently, for David to add her name as an emergency contact on financial accounts, just in case something happens to your father. She brought up more than once at family dinners how a house this size really should be a family asset, protected properly, not just sitting under one name. She started asking David pointed questions about his health insurance, his retirement accounts, whether he had a will. At first, I thought I was being paranoid. Then, Patricia found something that made paranoia feel like an understatement. Linda had, 11 years earlier, right around the time David and I got married, quietly filed for and then abandoned a legal claim against her late husband's estate, David's father, alleging that a property in Ohio had been improperly left to David's older sister instead of her. The case had been settled privately, sealed, and never discussed within the family. David didn't know it existed. I certainly didn't, but it told me everything I needed to know about who I was dealing with. A woman with a documented history of pursuing property she believed she was owed through legal channels, quietly, for years, without ever telling the people involved. Now she was doing informal reconnaissance on my house. I spent the next several months building a case of my own, not to attack Linda, but to protect what was mine and make absolutely certain that whatever she was planning couldn't succeed. Patricia helped me formalize the trust holding the house, tightened the language on my stock holdings, and quietly gathered documentation of every informal inquiry Linda's consulting service had made into my property. I told exactly one person outside my lawyer's office. My sister, who works in forensic accounting and helped me understand exactly what kind of paper trail Linda would need to build a real claim, and confirmed she didn't have it. Not even close. But she was trying. I still hadn't told David any of this by the time his 40th birthday arrived. Linda insisted on hosting it herself at our house. The biggest space. David deserves a real party. She took over every detail. Catering, a string quartet, a guest list of 60 people, including extended family. A week before, she texted me one line: "Make sure the house is presentable. People will be judging." I let her plan the entire party. I said nothing about the deed, the county records inquiry, the sealed Ohio case, or the folder now sitting on Patricia's desk. I simply waited because I'd learned by then that Linda's whole strategy depended on quiet moves nobody noticed until it was too late. I decided her 40th birthday speech was going to be the night that stopped working for her. The party looked beautiful. String lights, white tablecloths, a bar by the pool. Linda arrived early, handed me her coat without a word, and began redirecting caterers and rearranging my own furniture within 10 minutes of walking in. About an hour in, 2 glasses of wine deep, she stood up near the pool and tapped her glass for attention. "I just want to say," she began, beaming at 60 faces, "how proud I am of my son. David has worked so hard to build this beautiful home, this beautiful life for his family. It hasn't always been easy carrying a household like this on his shoulders." She turned toward me, smiling in that particular way she smiled right before a small cruelty. "And Rachel, dear, you've done an adequate job keeping things running around here, considering—" I set my glass down. "Linda," I said, keeping my voice level, "since you've brought this up in front of everyone, I think it's finally time to correct a few things. All at once, actually." The backyard quieted. David glanced at me, uncertain. "First," I said, "David didn't build this house. I did. I bought it outright 6 years ago with money from my own career. A career none of you have ever asked me one real question about in a decade. It's in a trust under my name. It has been the entire time." Linda's smile faltered, but she recovered quickly. "Rachel, this really isn't the moment for—" "It's exactly the moment," I said, "because you spent the last 18 months quietly trying to find out whether you could challenge that ownership. County Records has a log of the inquiries made by your legal consulting service. I have copies." The color drained from her face so fast David actually reached out to steady her arm. "Mom," David said slowly, "what is she talking about?" "I don't know what this woman is implying," Linda said, her voice tightening. "I'm not implying anything," I said. "I have documentation. Just like there's documentation of the claim you quietly filed against David's father's estate 11 years ago, contesting the Ohio property left to David's sister. Settled, sealed, never mentioned to David or me. Until now." David turned to his mother, and for the first time in the 11 years I'd known him, I watched real shock and real anger move across his face at the same time. "You sued Dad's estate? Against Katie? You never told me that existed." "It was private family business," Linda said, her voice rising, "handled appropriately, and it has nothing to do with tonight." "It has everything to do with tonight," I said, "because the same pattern is happening again right now with my house. You've spent 10 years treating me like staff in my own home because you never respected what I actually built. And for the last year and a half, while I fed you dinner and refilled your wine, you were quietly trying to find a legal way to take it." The backyard was completely silent. Even the string quartet had stopped mid-song. "I never meant to hide anything from David," Linda said, backpedaling now, glancing at the 60 guests watching her unravel in real time. "I only wanted to protect this family's assets." "This family's assets," I said, "are protected. Better than you know. I didn't just find out about your inquiries and panic, Linda. I spent the last year making absolutely certain that whatever claim you were building toward had nowhere to go. The trust is airtight. My lawyer has every document. If you'd ever actually filed something, you would have lost, and you would have lost publicly, with everyone in this family finding out exactly what you tried to do. I'm only telling you tonight, in front of everyone, because you handed me your coat one too many times while quietly circling my property behind my back." Linda didn't have a response. For the first time in a decade, she had absolutely nothing to say. David set down his own drink and turned to his mother, his voice low and controlled in a way I'd rarely heard from him. "You need to go home, Mom. We'll talk, but not tonight, and not here." Linda left within 20 minutes, without finishing her glass, without saying goodbye to most of the guests, walking out the same front door where she'd handed me her coat 1,000 times over the past decade, this time carrying it herself. The party didn't fully recover, but it didn't collapse either. Guests slowly resumed quiet conversation, the kind reserved for after witnessing something they'd be texting each other about for weeks. David found me by the bar an hour later, still visibly shaken. "How long have you known?" he asked. "About the county records thing, about Dad's estate." "About a year and a half," I said. "I didn't tell you right away because I needed to understand what I was actually dealing with before I brought it to you. I didn't want to accuse your mother of something I couldn't prove." "You could have told me," he said quietly. "I'm telling you now," I said. "I spent a year protecting what's mine instead of panicking about it, David. That's not the same as hiding it from you. I was building a case so that whatever she tried, it would fail completely, quietly, before it ever became a fight between the three of us. Tonight just accelerated the timeline." In the weeks that followed, David and his mother had a series of conversations I wasn't part of and don't fully know the contents of. What I do know is that Linda has not set foot in our house since that night. David, for the first time in our marriage, drew a hard boundary with her. No spare key, no unannounced visits, no involvement in our finances, ever. His sister Katie, upon learning about the sealed Ohio case, reopened contact with David after years of distance, and the two of them are slowly rebuilding the relationship Linda's secrecy had quietly damaged for over a decade. Patricia closed the file on Linda's inquiries permanently once it became clear no formal claim would ever be filed. The trust remains untouched, exactly as airtight as it was the day I built it. The house is still mine, on paper and otherwise, and for the first time in 10 years, no one who walks through that front door hands me their coat like I work there. I think about that night by the pool sometimes, the exact moment I decided a decade of small disrespects and 18 months of quiet legal maneuvering had finally reached the same breaking point at the same time. I didn't plan for both truths to surface together, but maybe that's exactly why it worked. Linda spent years assuming I was too polite, too accommodating, too busy playing hostess to notice what was happening around me. She was wrong about that from the very beginning. I noticed everything. I just chose, very carefully, when to say so.